in action. Rules that keep things going smoothly and fairly. Rules that help us get where we're going, help us work together, play together, and live together. Of course, in small groups, we sometimes get along without rules.
But there aren't any loud noises, just the sounds of working. We call these work sounds. Listen.
When many of us play together, rules make the game. Rules help us play fair with each other, so all can enjoy the game. Rules that apply equally to all. It's up to each one of us to know the rules and follow them.
Why do you suppose this room is so quiet? Perhaps we can learn from the teacher.
At New York's Madison Square Garden, a city college quintet races five fast and fancy red boots from the University of Oregon. It's the opening contest of an intersectional doubleheader, and New York draws 2 points worth of first blood.
And you know, we have found that knowing when to be quiet is a part of growing up.
16,000 fans watch the boys from the Pacific Coast as they try to stem the onslaught of City College fever. But it's all over when Silverstein shoots off the hardwood, decades the ball, and the ball game for CCNY 38-36.
Because a quiet room helps all of us learn.
How do you do it?
Well, each of us knows how to work quietly. That's very important.
But the evening sport is a long way from the locker room. In the second game, a team of Northwestern Wildcats is matched against St. John's University of Brooklyn. The lads from Illinois are off to a springboard start when Bob Coble eases Allen into the basket to take the lead.
Do you think you could walk this quietly? Listen to this work sound.
But tribal warfare comes to the gymnasium as the St. John's Indians retaliate with 2 points. From now on, the game is touch and go, with 10 men helping to get it there. A beautiful display of teamwork, and Northwestern gets in the number column with sharpshooting Bob Coble doing the honors.
Hello, everyone. Michael Jordan fans are the best, and we're going to be talking about here on Learn the Game about the evolution of the jump shot. But first, before we get into that, we have Politicus Rex here. How are you today, sir?
All right. How y'all doing?
Fantastic. I'm getting ready for a debate after this show with Travis T. Perfect on who's better, Magic Johnson or Larry Bird, where I'll be defending not Larry Bird. But if you'd like to come watch that, it'll be on in about a couple hours. But the jump shot. So last week we were talking about the rules of James Naismith's original basketball game, which should have been called bucket ball, but that's besides the point. The
H ball.
Yeah. But where do you, starting with the beginning aspects of the jump shot, can you describe that or the lack of a jump shot in the beginning of the invention of basketball?
Well, what got me thinking about this show was when Nick was mentioning the throw-ins from rugby and also soccer, how you have to throw the ball. Remember, the original players, they were football players, rugby players, soccer players. So that's the way they knew to throw a ball that size. Remember, the first basketball was literally a soccer ball. They were soccer players. So how are you going to throw this ball at a target above your head? You're going to throw it like you throw an inbounds. And same so that is how they started shooting basketball, because it came from the other sports that these players were experienced in. Then over time, as you start playing, you start to realize that it's, if I I'm not throwing it as far as I am on a throw in. I don't need two hands. I can, you cut down the variables if you hold it in one hand.
Yeah.
But that limits you to, that's only usually grown men. Kids still can't hold it with one hand. They're still using two hands and they're pushing it with their body, or throwing it over the head. So that's the beginning point. That's the start point. That's where you start the evolution from, is from that point. And when I was in the newspaper business, there was an article by the New York Times where they actually researched it, trying to find who invented the jump shot. And they couldn't get narrowed down to one particular person. There were rumors, there were stories about it going back as far as 1905, but there was no evidence, no physical evidence of any kind of picture or multiple eyewitnesses that were still alive that were able to say, oh yeah, and give the same story of the same game. So really you're talking about, it became a jump shot became a thing on outdoor courts because you'd play after it had rained and there'd be a puddle, or you'd have a dirt court, but there'd be one spot that had dried up, but it was still mud.
Mm-hmm.
So, you would hop in the air to shoot. So your feet didn't slide out from under you. One of the first guys was, Glenn Roberts. Glenn Roberts is probably the one that if you actually researched and said, okay, I'm going to say who, you'll come up with Glenn Roberts' name will be the earliest mention, which was about 1931.
Okay.
And he did it because he was a shorter guy. Most of the guys that did the jump shot were 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot. And it was because of the defensive rules of the time and the offensive rules of the time, you really didn't dribble around much. It was so hard to dribble because of the dribbling rules, how strictly they were enforced, that basically a dribble was a desperation move to get out of a double team, or you were making a sideways cut with the ball to get a better angle for a pass to a cutter. Yeah. It wasn't used the way the dribble is used now, or the way the dribble is overused now.
Yeah.
So the safer play to avoid getting called for any type of turnover was to, if you could, jump and shoot over the defender. So that became a thing with Glenn Roberts. He's from Virginia. It really seems that the jump shot began in the Appalachia. Okay. Appalachia. Glenn Roberts is from Virginia. There's a guy I can never pronounce his name right. Van Bali, I think his name is, but he's from Western North Carolina. A lot of these guys. But that's basically what it was. It started as a desperation shot when you were stuck. You couldn't get off a pass. You would use your dribble, whatever, and you would jump up and shoot to get a shot up over the defender. But Glenn Roberts, the first time he did it in a game, he was benched. And, he ended up proving a couple weeks later to the coach by making, I believe the story was a dozen in a row that way.
Yeah.
It's like, look, if you practice it, it's a legitimate shot. So, they started letting it go, and he ended up being an early scoring champion in the NCAA. He was the nation's leading scorer one year with a jump shot. But he had a two-handed jump shot. Remember, they're still shooting the two-hand.
Mm-hmm.
It really wasn't until after World War II that you started getting one-handed shooters, especially a one-handed jump shooter, because you had to have big hands. Remember, the size of the ball was a little tiny bit bigger. It didn't have the grooves in it. The pebbling wasn't the same. It was harder to hold on to, especially when it was sweaty. So it was harder to shoot a one-handed shot.
Yeah.
So you would get one-handed free throw shooters, you'd get one-handed set shooters, but the jump shooters were all two-handed originally. And then you start getting to the guys that you you might have heard of Kenny Sailors. Mm-hmm. He was a pro that he was a United States Marine in World War II, then in the NBA after, the NBL and then NBA after. And, he was a solid pro with a one-handed jump shot. He was a 5'11" point guard. There's actually, if you Google his name, there's a great picture of him shooting a jump shot. And I like to show it to guys that say, well, guys back then weren't athletic, because his feet are obviously, like 2.5 feet off the ground on a jump shot.
Yeah.
And same with Glenn Roberts. Or not Glenn Roberts, but there's a couple others you can find if you look at history of the jump shot, and you'll see these guys from the 30s and 40s, and man, they are jumping. I mean, their feet are way off the ground. They're high. And it's just funny when you hear them say, oh, guys couldn't jump back then. It's like, oh, yeah, they could.
Yeah. What's up?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, looking up briefly for this, Kenny Sailors is one that showed up. The aspect of the jump shot, I think that's interesting about it, is that as a bigger guy, outside of just trying to get extra range on a shot, to me, a set shot is generally okay to shoot as long as you're open. It gives you more space, obviously, if you jump higher. But I generally do I jump maybe an inch off the ground when I take a shot. I would call it a set shot, but I just think it's interesting, especially as the game has evolved, but even in the very beginning aspects of it, that it was not a common thing at first until somebody decided that, or some people would figure out that the mechanics for it are better for at least distance. And then, I mean, what are your thoughts on the jump shot outside of because to me, in my experience, I think that the set shot is a more consistent shot to make than a jump shot. I think a jump shot is just an added mechanic that can interfere with your accuracy and, on average. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. Well, what is a free throw? When you take the time and possession out of it, you take the defense out of it, and you get a wide open shot from 15 feet. You can shoot it any way you want. How does 99.999% of the basketball world shoot it?
It's a set shot.
They shoot a one-handed set shot.
Yeah.
So that tells you what is the most effective shot.
Yeah.
And how the game was originally played, the strategy behind it was you moved quickly, set screens, tried to do misdirection to get an open shot. And if you couldn't take an open set shot, you didn't take the shot.
Yeah.
That was the game of basketball. The X's and O's was to get an open shot. Then on top of the X's and O's, you had, once you do the maneuvering to get a wide open look, can your guy make it? That's what made basketball great in the beginning. It wasn't just chess. Like chess, you outmaneuver the opponent, you take the piece. But in basketball, there was another part to it. It was, you do the X's and O's, you outmaneuver the defense, but then you still have to make the shot.
Yeah.
And that is the brilliance of basketball. Mm-hmm. And that's why for basically nearly 100 years, 90 years, the rules were meant to keep athleticism out of the game as much as they could, because it was supposed to be a battle of minds, a battle of wits, a battle of execution 5-on-5. And once you started loosening the rules and allowing individual athleticism in to show itself in the sport, you started creating a lopsided playing field where some of the best basketball players in the world can't make the NBA. They go and play in China or Australia or Europe. Guys that are absolutely phenomenal basketball players. They understand the game. They know how to play the game, but they're not 6'8" with a 44-inch vertical leap. So they can't play in the NBA.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. The NBA has gone out of whack. It's gotten distorted. It's not the best basketball players in the world. It's the most effective athletes in the world that can play basketball. There's a difference.
Well, this is something that's interesting. I think I've brought him up to you a few times over the years, but there's a guy named TJ McConnell who got drafted. He went undrafted, but got selected, or you know what I mean? He got signed, that's a better word. He got signed by the 76ers, and little, in respect to NBA terms, tiny white guy. He's about 6'1" point guard. And now he's in the NBA Finals with the Pacers and has broken the record for the most points, the most assists, the most rebounds, and the most steals ever from a bench player in the NBA Finals. And it's not because he's athletic, or in respect to the extremes that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But he absolutely is a hustler. He's a fantastic basketball player. And I used to joke because he'd be running next to everybody, and his legs are moving like this while other people are just taking
going the same speed.
Yep. And I just think it's fantastic to see people actually recognizing, particularly being a 76ers fan, that people are recognizing his ability to play basketball now, and they're hyping him up. But in comparison to everyone else on his team, he's not an athlete. You know what I mean? So he's a fantastic basketball player. I'm just happy to see that he's getting his flowers, per se.
And that's the problem I have with modern basketball, why I don't bother watching it, because it's not the best basketball players.
Yeah.
The most skilled players. It's guys that can run and jump the highest that can also, play some basketball. I mean, they're amazing basketball players, but the skill level, as far as the team is concerned, has dropped drastically. And Absolutely. It's that point. And if you look at a lot of guys, like they talk about the jump shot and how guys back, like we're talking when the jump shot was the minority of players, that it was an oddity. If you actually pay attention and watch an NBA game, there are a lot of NBA players that don't shoot a jump shot.
Yeah.
They shoot set shots.
Yeah.
But it's completely glossed over. It's not even something like everyone talks about Bird. Bird really didn't shoot a jump shot. Bird shot a set shot.
Yeah.
He's one of the greatest. You'll be arguing not, but Magic Johnson shot a set shot.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your debate later. Two shooting 6'9" guys from the 80s and 90s.
Well, what's funny is that I think they're both considered non-athletic in NBA terms. But if you had to say somebody, now this isn't exactly to the point, but they're very similar in a lot of ways. But if there's one person that's got the edge athletically, I'd have to say, in respect to, I'm not talking about quickness. I think it's too debatable for that. But I think one thing that's not up for debate is the foot speed of Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird, and going back and forth to get up on offense with the fast breaks. Not that Bird didn't do that, but he didn't do it like Magic. And then also to get back on defense. So he often, looking back at a lot of what people are saying, and then some highlights and such, it seems that Magic Johnson has the edge in respect to foot speed over Bird, and that it's not particularly close. Well, I think everything else is debatable, and that they're otherwise very similar in a lot of ways athletically.
Well, the thing, Magic, remember, had knee issues.
Yeah.
Once he started playing full-time point guard for the Lakers. People forget he wasn't the full-time point guard as a rookie.
Yep.
Norm Nixon was, and Norm Nixon was an all-star.
Yep.
The fact is, if Bird hadn't have gone in the previous draft, if he hadn't gotten signed, I believe it was a week before the draft or 2 weeks before the 79 draft, his name, if he would have refused to sign with Boston, his name would have went back into the draft. And Jerry West has said they were going to take Bird.
Yeah.
Bird would have been the number 1 pick in the 79 draft. But then Boston ended up giving Bird, making him the highest paid player on the team, and he signed, and thus ineligible. But people forget it, but Magic Johnson was very quick when he was young. He led the NBA in steals 2 of his first 3 years in the league.
Yeah.
But then the knee problems started once they traded Norm Nixon, and he became full-time, full-on point guard. Every minute he was on the court, he was the ball handler. Then he started having knee issues.
Yeah.
So when you look at the later championships, the back-to-back in 87 and 88, losing in 80, no, they won in 85. You started to see him play differently for 2 reasons. Number 1, his knees were an issue. And number 2, with the particular matchups that they were having, Kareem was very important to establish Kareem. And Kareem was 38, 39, 40, 41 years old during this late run. And so they had the fast break offense with Cooper and Worthy and Scott, all on the – but if the initial break wasn't there, they didn't take it. They waited for Kareem. And the side effect of that is you also saved Magic's knees. So a lot of Magic's later highlights in his career were half-court passes, the baby sky hook, that type of thing. It wasn't the just getting out and sprinting highlight reels that you saw in 80, 81, 82. So a lot of it is propaganda. Magic was the better athlete. But Bird was the more skilled with the ball.
Yeah, I think he could. I guess with that, I think that he could create his own shot better. I think he was a better one-on-one player per se. Yeah, I would say he's probably better.
Here's why, though. Here's why. This is why I say you can't directly compare. We've had this discussion before, talking about 70 small forwards. Bird and Magic, both 6'9". They both came in together. They played. They were best friends, best enemies, is what they used to say. Is they were best enemies. They were friends off the court, but they went at it on the court with no remorse, no holding back. But the thing that people don't understand is Bird was always going against a front court player.
Yeah.
He was always going against someone his size. Magic never was covered by a man his size. Not one time in his career. Even in the 91 finals, Pippen is considerably smaller than Magic. Even when they played Detroit, Rodman is smaller than Magic.
Yeah.
Magic always had a size advantage every game. Every game of his career. until he came back out of retirement and was playing small forward and power forward. But during his stretch there of 9 finals, he had the size advantage in every single game he played in his entire career. When they played Houston, he would be matched up against Robert Reed, who was 6'7". Later on, it would be against McRae, who was also 6'7", 6'8". No one 6'9", 225 ever covered Magic. So that's one thing to remember.
Yeah. Yeah, that I mean, that might go against me. But in my debate, if it, but the aspect of it is that I think also to a point is that Magic, I think, in my opinion, not that this didn't happen with Bird, but I think there was a more drastic, per se, evolution or style change. That's probably a better term, that Magic did in his career while staying successful. Because
people think that Magic was just a big point guard.
Yeah.
Magic Johnson was like Oscar Robertson. He was a phenomenal. If he had came in the NBA at 6'9" and they said, you know what, Magic, we're going to play you at power forward. We're going to play you at center. We're going to play you at small forward. No matter what position they gave him, he was going to be an all-time great.
Yeah.
He proved that as a rookie in the finals. With the Dream Team, look at his statistics. He fit in. He did whatever was needed. He let other guys, he let Stockton play point. He let Pippen handle the ball. I believe Pippen was actually the assist leader on the Dream Team. He would grab rebounds. He would get out on the break. He'd find the open man. People totally underestimate Magic's game, but the difference between Magic and Bird was their teammates. Okay? When you look at the Boston front line when Bird goes there, they didn't have scoring punch in the front court. Cowens was old. Cedric Maxwell, I love Cornbread, but he was never that guy. He was never an all-star. Mm-hmm. Okay? Bird had to take on the scoring load in the front court. That's what he had to do for the team. Magic came into a team that had all-star point guard and an all-time great center. They also had a Hall of Fame small forward in Jamal Wilkes. Magic had to find his place. And he bounced around positions the first year, 2.5 years. He bounced around doing different positions. Think about it as a 19, 20, 21-year-old going into the NBA. This is when there were less teams, so more concentrated talent. There was no ABA. You had the merger. So all the top talent was there. And you're coming in as a 20-year-old, and you have to fit in with these icons of the sport. You're not taking over. You have to fit in. And you can't boss around the GM and the man and the management because they're Jerry West and Bill Sharman.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're surrounded by Hall of Famers everywhere you look. You have to find your place. Bird was able to walk in and was handed the keys day one.
Yeah.
Because he's what the team needed at that time. How he played was where the hole was in their lineup. So he has the bigger splash. He's rookie of the year, all that stuff. He's got the better stats and all. But he was able to play his way. And they built a team. They got McHale, they got Parrish, they got Dennis Johnson, they drafted Ainge. They built a team around Bird. The guys that were on the team in 81, most of those guys were not the same ones when they hit their stride in 84, 85, 86. Henderson was gone. Total turnover of the team. Magic, he played with Kareem for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they brought in Worthy in 82, so he was with Worthy for like 7 of those seasons. Cooper was there for most of those seasons. He had a solid veteran team that he walked into as the underclassman. Vastly talented, but super raw. And it took multiple coaches, to get that whole Showtime thing running and as successful as it was.
What did you ask this question? And I don't know what you know about this, if anything. What did Bill Sharman think of Magic?
To my recollection, Sharman's the one that drafted him.
Yeah.
At the time of the draft, Jerry West had no official capacity. He was employed by the Lakers, but he was like a jack of all trades. He was in the office and he was consulted on everything, from player development to coaching to draft to free agent signings, all of it. He was involved with all of it, but he had no specific title at that time. Bill Sharman drafted Magic, number 1. And remember, the only reason they got to draft Magic was because they won a coin flip with Chicago. Otherwise, Chicago has the backcourt of Magic Johnson and Reggie Theus, and you likely never see Jordan in a Chicago uniform.
Yeah.
Coin flip changed the NBA.
Yeah, I recently watched I forget what it's called, but the 30 for 30 with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, surrounding the Boston Celtics and the Lakers through the 80s, to be more specific. But one of the scenes is when they hired O'Reilly Pat Riley, excuse me, not O'Reilly, Pat Riley, that he was that Jerry West was the co-coach of that immediately, or that's how they announced it, that they were co-coaches. Which
that's how Buss announced it, and that's what Buss had in his mind. He wanted West to be an executive head coach, meaning Riley was a great player in college. He was one of the greatest players to come out of New York City. He was the center and a power forward for Rupp's Runts at Kentucky, part of the Golden Lineage. He played for Adolph Rupp. Adolph Rupp played for James Naismith. So Riley has retired. He was a Laker. He retired. He becomes an assistant coach. And the thing that he had over the previous 2 coaches was he was a player. He played with West. He played with Wilt. He knows these guys. He knows a locker room. He knows success. He was a member of the 33 consecutive win team, 72. He knows basketball. But for a lot of, and you see it these days with like Steve Nash, Derek Fisher, and a lot of pro players that make the switch to coaching, their first coaching gig doesn't always go great. Jason Kidd, his first coaching gig didn't really go great. They need to learn the coaching ropes. You have to look at it different. You need to speak to the players different. You're not their buddy in the locker room. You have to learn a difference. And what they were worried about was that Riley would have an issue. So they wanted West, and by they I mean Jerry Buss, wanted West as a co-head coach, which means he devised the game plan. He had top say for who was getting on the court, who wasn't, who are we cutting, who are we trading for, who are we drafting, who he wants on the team, but he was not going to be traveling with the team, doing all the, going to all the different arenas and everything. It was going to be his game plan. He was going to set it forth. And then Riley was going to take the philosophy and the game plan and enact it. West believed in Riley way more than Bus Sharman did. Mm-hmm. And he discreetly, took a half step back and was like, Pat, it's your team. Okay. We can't run a team that way. You can't run a team like. He understood what Jerry West was doing, a business move. He wanted an XO and a CO.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't do that on a sports team. There has to be one voice in the locker room heard above all others. You can't have the guy in the locker room with the biggest voice then having to answer to another coach outside the locker room.
Yeah.
It can't happen that way. So that's how that was introduced, but it was never that.
Yeah.
They were just so afraid of disrespecting Jerry West. They didn't understand what fueled West. Because Bus didn't know West. He was the new owner at that point. He didn't understand that Jerry West, and it's funny when you hear this arguing, I had mentioned Johnny's show, how they were talking about, the better player in ring, what was it called?
Ring culture.
Ring culture. And talking about how that's like Jordan fans came up with that or something. It's like, no, that ring culture is the culture of every sport that's ever existed. The best one is the one that wins. Period.
Yeah.
And Jerry West agrees with that more than any other human being on the planet. It didn't matter what he did individually. It didn't matter what accolades were given to him. If he lost the last game of the season, he literally was suicidal. He had the same fire that Bill Russell did, but Bill Russell kept beating him. Someone has to lose. And then when it came down to the final two, he kept losing. He was 1-8, I believe, in the finals. And they were always, everyone that involved with the Lakers understood that Jerry West literally gave his soul to the game and to the sport. And winning was all he cared about. And they were so worried about upsetting the logo, so to speak. They would always like treat him with kid glove, didn't want to upset him, didn't want to disrespect him in any way. But he didn't care. He just wanted to win. Just freaking win. But it's hard for a lot of people that don't have that attitude to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and Sharman was the same way, just so you know. That's going back another generation. Mm-hmm. He was an all-star when Jerry West was in high school. But Bill Sharman, remember, do you know anything about him as a player? What his reputation was?
I know he's a scorer. I don't know about his personal or, not particularly with the reputation.
He was a fighter. He would scrap with anybody with drop of a hat. No one got in more fights in NBA history than Bill Sharman.
Yeah.
And he also played for the Dodgers.
Okay, yeah. Well, would he start the fights?
Yes. He was a hothead. He would start throwing down. Yep. He was that guy. But he also had all-star ability. But he was feisty.
Why? How does this apply to the Jerry West Magic thing? That he was feisty, or was this just a sidebar?
Well, no, he was talking about how he was announced as the co-coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't agree with that. He's like, that's not a path to winning. You don't have to worry about disrespect because he had no title. If they're making Riley the coach, Sharman's still the GM. Okay, well, what's Jerry West? What is his title? Officially, I believe at the time it was a consultant. Like he was a consultant.
Yeah.
You know, he actually, and he didn't, but and that was the thing is Jerry Buss loved Jerry West. But he worried too much about Jerry West's feelings and how he was represented publicly. And that's why the whole co-coach thing.
Yeah.
But Jerry West was against that completely. It's like you can't win that way. There needs to be one voice and one voice only, and that voice needs to be Pat.
Yeah, I saw in the documentary, it said he was an offensive coordinator, Jerry West, so that he was on the bench sometimes, or at
home
least
games,
for some period of time.
That's why he wouldn't go to Boston. So who's going to coach the team in Boston?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this brings up another question, though. So, because when I don't know enough about it, but when I think of the later, at least, Lakers teams, it didn't seem like a fast break team. I could see how in respect to the 70s, where the teams that West was on, I could see how the beginning teams were more of a fast break team. But how do you think his experience helped drive what became Showtime as an offensive coordinator?
Well, this is the thing is nobody remembers the name of the coach that invented Showtime.
Oh, was it Westhead?
Nope.
Or are you talking to? I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't even remember his name. I always forget his name. McKellum, Keller, something like that. He was the head coach. But then he wrecked on his bicycle, I think on Venice Beach, like 13 games into the season, and Westhead took over.
Okay. Yeah.
And took them to the title. And he never got his job back. He ended up getting a job, I believe, at Golden State.
Okay.
But he was the one with the foresight. McKinney. There you go. Thank you very much, McKinney. He is the one that came up with the fast break offense, saying, no, you guys are all wrong. This 6'8", 6'9" kid at Michigan State will change the NBA if you just give him the ball. He is a bigger, better Oscar Robertson. Give him the ball and get out of his way. Give him runners in the lane. Give him a sure thing with Kareem down low as a safety net, and we will win championship after championship. That was McKinney.
Yeah. Yeah. So even because I heard what I understand, they fired Westhead because he tries to change the offense again.
Yeah.
To a slower paced, a more methodical paced thing. Do you think it was more so West or Riley that brought back the Showtime aspect of it?
Well, here's the thing. This is the big here's the difference between successful NBA coaches and not successful NBA. You have coaches that are in the NBA that get a shot in the NBA who are all world coaches in other places. They're in college and they're phenomenal. They're coaching in Europe. They're coaching where, and they are just fantastic coaches. They get in the NBA, they're not as successful. And the reason is it's a copycat league. Okay? And perfect, yes, it's perfect. Westhead wanted to get out of McKinney's shadow. He wanted them to win with he wanted to prove he could coach. It became about him. What West wants is the players to play the way they play. at the time, he was the greatest two guard that had ever played. No argument. After him, you're talking Sam Jones, and then his boss, Bill Sharman, right? Those are the greatest two guards at this point in history. Michael Jordan is at Laney High School.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and I mean, it's not close. It's Jerry West and then a far distance, to the next guy. And Jerry West, as a player, knows what players want. Any player, Shaq will tell you that. That's why he went to LA. They'll tell you, you want to play for Jerry West because he understands players. He knows what players want. He knows how players like to play. And Jerry's West thing is, okay, we got him now. This is what he's successful at. This is how he wants to play. So damn it, play it that way.
Yeah.
And then Riley was a player's coach. So it wasn't a style thing. It was an ego thing that caused Westhead to that whole thing to come to a flaming, bonfire of a finish, dumpster fire. It was egos. It was not philosophy. It was egos. The guy that wanted his limelight got kicked to the curb. The two guys that just wanted to win kept their jobs and won more rings.
Yeah. 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 No, I get it. It's interesting. So I guess to bring it back a little bit, did Bill Sharman have a jump shot, or did he have a set shot?
Bill Sharman, I believe, transitioned. If I remember correctly, when he started, he had the two-hander.
Mm-hmm.
But he had the one-hander. I remember all his Boston highlights. He had the one-hander.
Yeah.
Remember, this is a transition period when Sharman's in there. Sharman, is the conduit. He's going from the Mikan era into the Russell era. So that's when you're seeing the big shift. And a lot of it, I didn't mention the greatest jump shooter of those times, which is Joe Falks.
Yeah.
And he has specifically said that he became a jump shooter because once they got into the pro leagues, he said he never had the issue growing up. He never had the issue college, high school, never had the problem. He shot a set shot, a hop shot. He got up as a bit because he was a really great athlete. But it wasn't until he got to the pros when they started playing games on top of ice rinks,
mm-hmm.
where you'd start getting the condensation seeping through the wood. And you'd have puddles on the court by the time you get to the third, fourth quarter, because you got, 20,000 people in the stands. You didn't have air conditioning like today. They had big fans, So the ice underneath on the hockey rink would start melting, and it would seep up through the wood. That's why the old Boston Garden had the dead spots, because they refused to replace that parquet floor. But the problem is from the Bruins ice rink, it would soak the wood in spots, but they refused to replace it. So after 20 years, you get those famous Boston dead spots where you literally would dribble the ball and the ball wouldn't come back up. And this isn't 50s and 60s. This is 1980s.
Yeah.
But that's why the Boston parquet had dead spots, was because they refused to replace that famous parquet floor. So the ice rink would mess up the wood, warp the wood. And that's why Joe Falks started jump shooting, because he would go to plant his feet to shoot and he'd slip. So he started jumping, shooting, so he'd have a steady release. And he became, he was the NBA's first great scorer. He was the first guy to score 30 in a game, 40 in a game, 50 in a game. He was the first all-time leading scorer in NBA history. Because he made the point to outscore Mikan right from game one. So he could be but he retired far sooner, and then obviously Mikan just destroyed everything. But one guy I wanted to mention was Hank Luisetti. Hank Luisetti did not have a jump shot. You'll read a lot. If you say who had the first jump shot, you'll come up with the name Hank Luisetti out of Stanford a lot. Mm-hmm. Hank Luisetti said in an interview before he died, I believe he died in 1980. Before he died, he said, I did not have a jump shot. I had a running jump hook that I would do after I pump faked. So he had the hook, essentially running. He would jump and hook. He invented that. But he did not shoot a jump shot as a regular shot. But you'll see that name come up a lot. But if you do a whole lot of research and really dig into Hank Luisetti, you'll see that he actually says himself that he did not shoot a jump shot. But still, if you look at the Google and all that and the AI response that they tell you, his name will be in there. But he himself said that he didn't shoot a jump shot. Take it the other way. Who was the last guy to shoot a two-handed set shot in the NBA?
I have no idea.
You know him. You know him. You know the name. You mentioned it when we talked about assists. Bob Davies.
Okay. Yeah. Bob Davies.
Yep. But people don't understand. They get so caught up in the propaganda and the image that they have in their head that they're not looking at the image on the screen when they're watching these old games. And they'll say, well, guys back then weren't athletic. How you can watch highlights of Wilt Chamberlain, young Oscar Robertson, and say they were unathletic is just mind-boggling. You see guys today some of the best players in the NBA now, I'm 56 and I'm faster probably than Jokic getting down the court, because I'm not having to, pull 270 pounds, Yeah. But, and I'm a runner now, but it's just people, what the image that people get in their head is so often so distant from reality. If you actually watch an NBA game, which you can't do now, there's only one left, but watch games and be an amateur scorekeeper, right? But you don't have to get all into each individual point and everything, but count each shot. What kind of shots are taken?
Yeah.
How many are jump shots? How many are dunks? How many are layups? How many are tip-ins? How many are hooks? If they're taking threes, now they talk about threes, right? They say, well, guys back in the old days, well, they couldn't shoot threes and they shot set shots.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if you watch the game now and you'll see a team take 22 threes in a game, if you notice, about 11 of them are set shots.
Yeah.
They're not shooting jump shots either.
Yeah.
But that's not the image that we have, because the highlight reels. If you actually watch a game, if you remember Sean Marion, with that funky shooting style,
the chest pass.
Hey, that guy played in the 2000s. Okay, that guy played in the 90s and 2000s, and that little push shot like that. I mean, come on, what are we talking about? They want to forget about that, and they want to talk about, Steph.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, other than Steph, who's won an NBA title chucking up all the threes? You know, you go a step farther, who has won multiple titles, chucking up all the threes. But they say, oh, well, this is modern basketball. Only because they want it to be, because more fans click on it. It's not more effective. It's not.
Give me 1 second, Rex. I'll be right back.
But that's the issue with people talk about the jump shot and how now it's perfected because guys can do like chest passes from 35 feet at the basket, which is, by the way, is how they shot literally 100 years ago. But the jump shot, after a time, it had its initial period. You see field goal percentages dropped because the ball was a little bit bigger, was a little bit slicker. The shoes were worse. The rims were not flex rims. They didn't give. So once the world went to the jump shot, then the rules and the equipment manufacturers followed suit and made the shoes. Like, you want to know why, Converse All-Stars have no support in them for jumping? Because when they were made, you didn't jump. It doesn't mean the players couldn't jump. It means by the rules of the day, they didn't jump. So that's why Chuck Taylors didn't have the cushion in them. Now, the jump shot came into the league. Then 10, 15 years later, you get three-point shot. You get loosened up rules where you have more athleticism in. Now you have to have shoes that will support the athlete, not the basketball player.
Yeah.
The cushioning of these shoes, of modern basketball shoes, is like similar to any other sport where there's jumping. Okay, well, basketball wasn't that originally. It was quick. It was two-dimensional, quick movements, quick cuts, moving in unison. Me going this way, passing to a teammate moving that way to throw off the defender to get a basket. Deception. It's that type of stuff. So you had a rubber-soled shoe with a high ankle. So you wouldn't roll your ankle planting on all those cuts. That's how the game was played. Now, does anyone even make a high top?
Oh, yeah. There's a ton of high tops, yeah.
Because I went looking at basketball shoes the other day, and there were no high tops. There were lows and mids.
Yeah, well, I don't know enough about shoes, but there's definitely ones that go over your ankle.
Yeah, and it's like, well, you see, like when I played, all of them went over your ankle.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, the jump shot came in, and it turned the game from two-dimensional to three-dimensional.
Yeah. So
now you've got that going on, because once the offense jumps, what does the defense have to do? They got to jump. They got to jump. So now everyone's jumping. If one guy starts jumping, everyone has to start jumping.
Yeah.
Not only the guy doing the jump shot back in the day, when John Cooper or Kenny Sailors, when they went up for their jump shot, they're not the only one on the court jumping. That means the guy covering them has to jump too.
Yeah.
So now you start getting ankle injuries. Now you start getting knee injuries. And then as it became a worldwide phenomenon, okay, well, we need better shoes because the old style shoes are not for jumping. They're for running and cutting. So now you're changing the equipment. If guys are going to hold the ball with one hand, okay, 4-panel ball isn't going to work anymore. We need an 8-panel ball.
Yeah.
Okay, the rule says the ball cannot be larger than 30 inches in diameter and circumference. But the ball isn't 30 inches. It's 29 and a half.
No.
That was set forth in the early 90s with FIBA. You got size 7, size 6, size 5.
Mm-hmm.
So an NBA ball is now 29 and a half inches. But the rule has said since 1950 that it cannot exceed 30. But you know what? But the difference between 30 and 29 and a half is, now the funny answer is a half inch. But what it is, if you're an average size guy with an average size hand, it's the difference between not being able to palm it and being able to palm it.
Yeah.
Which means a one-handed shot is now more effective.
Mm-hmm.
Think, if basketball was the exact same sport, but the hoop was twice as big and you played with a beach ball.
Yeah.
No one's shooting one-handed jump shots. It would never become a thing. Okay?
Yeah.
Ever. It's because once it started to become a thing, then the different equipment pertaining to the sport started changing and modifying and modernizing what they were doing to make, like, the greatest thing to happen to shooting percentages was Daryl Dawkins.
And the breakaway rim.
When he started breaking the rim, so they invented the breakaway rim, look at how shooting percentages went up. Because now when the ball hit the rim, it just didn't go banging off, hitting an iron rim. You could shoot a total brick that would hit flat against the front of the rim. Back when I was a kid, that's a fast break going the other way because the ball's going all the way out past the free throw line.
Yeah.
You shoot that same brick that hits square on the front of the rim now, it goes in.
Yeah.
Because the rim takes all of the impact and the ball just bounces straight up and goes in. You shoot that same shot outside on a double rim, or you shoot on a rim in the 1970s when I was growing up, and it's a fast break going the other way because the ball's literally coming right back at you past your head.
Yeah.
All right. Equipment changed these things and made it all more possible.
Hey, Rex, I enjoyed this conversation. I need to eat something and then write my script for this debate that I have coming up. If you're watching, I'm having a debate with T Perfect at the top of the next hour. Who's better, Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird? I am not defending Larry Bird, although I'm wearing a Larry Bird shirt. I'll be defending or arguing for Magic Johnson. T Perfect will be arguing for Larry Bird. So we'll see how that goes.
I guess then I'm arguing for Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah. Yes. Speaks off.
Who was a great sportsman.
Yep. The man's man. You have any last words for the people?
Just same as always. Research some of these names. Look at some of these old pictures, these images, and see what the game was. Not what you hear, whoever on YouTube say it was. Look for yourself. There were absolutely phenomenal athletes that played back then. Innovators. That's why I love 1970s basketball. Without the 70s, you wouldn't have had the great league of the 80s and 90s. It was built on what happened in the 70s. Without that, people trash the 70s. But it's the most influential decade in the history of the sport. Without the 1970s, you don't have the modern NBA in any way, shape, or form. You don't have the scoring. You don't have the fame. You don't have the money. You don't have the free agency. You don't have the worldwide acclaim. You have none of it without 70s basketball.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
And now I'm going to drag my kids out to the park, whether they want to go or not, because they've been stuck in the house all day.
Well, I hope you have fun. I've been kicking my kid out the house lately.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Real quick.
Yes.
10 seconds. I'm buying a netball basket and, goal, the post, the basket, and ball. And I'm going to work out that game I told you about. It's not exactly korfball. It's not exactly netball. But we're going to play it on the grass in the backyard.
It's Rex ball.
Well, if it actually becomes a thing, we'll use my real name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still cracks me up that so many people don't understand that Politicus Rex is a title It's not my name. If you know Latin, Politicus Rex actually means something.
I just
I know everyone calls me Rex. I just stick with it.
I just assumed you were a dinosaur.
I've been called that by many basketball fans. Yeah.
Anyway,
Which
Rex,
is true. It is true. I tell you, if I could, I play, and this is the thing I've told you all before. I've played original basketball.
Mm-hmm.
We had to play it every Thursday afternoon to learn the game better.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And it worked. You know, we all had to get our reffing cards and ref Little League basketball so we'd understand the game better. That's kind of coaching I had, guys. But if you play original basketball, and it's so hard to, if you can't imagine it, watch korfball or netball, and you'll see basically what basketball look like. The only difference is positioning of the goals. They move them out from the baseline, and there's no backboard. You can shoot on them 360 degrees. Other than that, basically the rules are, as far as contact and moving violations and fouls, it's basically the same as original basketball. And when you say, well, it looks slow and they're not allowed to touch each other, exactly. That's why basketball was made, to give the athletes at Springfield College something to do in the winter where they wouldn't kill each other. So anyway, till next week.
Yes, thanks for joining us, the three people. And
we had three?
Well, we got three watching us now. Yeah, we're coming back up. Hopefully I get my channel back. If not, then I guess we're doing.
Well, I mean, let's be
starting
honest. Nobody
over.
really wants to hear me talk about what happened 50 and 100 years ago. But
well, usually we get like 20-some people, but there's 20-some people doing it.
Well, that number is not correct. There's actually 362 people in here.
Oh my God, that guy.
Inside joke. All right. Yeah, I got to go too.
All right, Rex. Until next week.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.